Hello everyone, this is John Guest from Lendor & Guest LLP. Likely been sent this video because you're one of our clients. I'm going to be helping you complete the Form 13 financial statement, and this is a document that you're going to be completing with your lawyer. If you're struggling through this, it's best to just let us know. This is something that we can complete together with you. Usually it takes maybe an hour or two at the very most. So if you're able to do this, it is a big help in the meetings. It can save you some money and some time having this already complete. What documents you'll need before we get started are your tax return or notice of assessment or proof of income from the previous year. So if we're in 2022, we need your 2021 tax return, notice of assessment, or yearly proof of income. Sometimes that can be the last pay statement. The second thing you'll need is proof of your current income. That can be a pay stub, proof of EI, disability payments, whatever the most recent proof is. Typically that's going to be your pay stub, and we'd ask you to provide us with the last 3 pay stubs. Your financial statement might look slightly different than the one I have on screen, and that's fine. What we're going to be starting with is Part 1 of the form, and that's further down. Part 1, income. You're going to be first inputting the source of your income, and in this case the client has indicated that they've been employed by Global Affairs Canada, and they've included the address of where they work. If you're self-employed, you'll want to include the details of the business name, and if you're unemployed, you'll want to provide the details of the last time you worked and details of the workplace, the name and the address. Proof of income is just the paycheck stub. If you've received income through self-employment or a corporation, we've likely already talked to you about what we need from you. The easiest is a statement of income and expenses. The first item we'll actually have to fill out is your gross income from the previous year. The easiest way to obtain this is through a notice of assessment or a tax return or the value of your year-to-date on your final pay stub for the year. So this is a common form that we are seeing these notice of assessments in. What you'll want to be looking at here specifically is line 1500, total income. And you can see in this example, the amount is $80,668. That's what we're going to be adding in. There's also going to be documents that you'll provide to us, a copy of your personal income tax return for the past 3 years, notice of assessments for the last 3 years, and then 3 pay stubs. So if you've provided that to your lawyer, or you're going to provide it along with this at the meeting, you're going to email it to us maybe, just put an X there in that box. This is a table that must be completed for all income sources. So sometimes you have more than one. The easiest way to do this is based on your pay stub. So this is going to be your current income. This is not your income from last year. And it has to be an accurate statement of your income. So usually the most recent pay stub is a good example of that. If for whatever reason your pay is unusually low or unusually high, let us know. It might not be representative of what you'll need to do. The other thing I should mention is that we have specific tools that we can use, so you need not actually do any tallying. What you'll be doing is inputting information, and you can input a code, which we'll talk about, and that will help us easily do the calculation for you. You won't have to tally up all these columns. So for employment income, let's look at the pay stub. In this example, we know that the pay period is every 2 weeks, and that's important for the code that we're going to be inputting. And you can see here what we're dealing with is the gross income. We don't really need to know about the net pay. So at the bottom you can see that after deductions the net pay is $1,374.45. We don't need that number right now. What we're looking at is the $1,730.77. And that's for 80 hours. So we know again that this is a bi-weekly pay stub. So we're going to input that right here. And we're also going to input a code. And the code that you'll be adding to the end of this, just to make the math easy for you, is W if the item you're entering occurs weekly, B if it's bi-weekly, and Y yearly. So the amount received here is a monthly amount, but the pay is bi-weekly. So we're going to put B in here. You don't have to do any tallying. Please send us this electronically with the B included, because we can just click one button on our end and the amount will automatically be calculated. If you receive a combination of different kinds of income, so employment income, and you might receive interest and investment income, that might be separate. You might receive a T4A for that, for example. You can include that as well. So let's say you have a savings account and the savings account earned $300 of interest each year. So again, I'm going to put up that cheat sheet, Y here for yearly, and on our end, we're just going to hit calculate, and we'll get the amount automatically. The other common one that people tend to miss is child tax benefits. There's a HST credit. I don't know when you'll be watching this, but there may be other credits that exist at that point. You want to input that amount. Usually those are paid every 2 months, so you may have to do some math there. So let's put in 250 here. If there's other non-cash benefits that you receive, you want to include that as well. So for example, we can say company car and provide some details, whatever you think will be helpful. So in this example, the company car is a little bit more challenging to determine a yearly market value. The majority of you aren't going to have these benefits, but I do see them come up now and then. For personal calls, it's a little bit easier. We're just going to estimate the cost at $80 a month, which is $960 a year. When we get to Part 2 expenses, we want to be as accurate as possible. If you're struggling, let us know. We're here to help. The reason why we want to be as accurate as possible and limit the estimations that we're doing is that we want to make sure that when another side, the other lawyer, receives a financial statement from our firm, they can count on it being accurate. You can count on it representing what your actual financial situation is. It's a reputation that we have and we benefit from it. It makes our jobs easier, but also all of our clients, including you, benefit from it. We want to make sure that this is as accurate as possible. We don't want to have a situation where your credibility is being undermined by your own financial statement. It has to make sense at the end of the day. So in terms of the first part, the automatic deductions, we'll turn to the pay stubs. Here we have the deduction section of the pay stub, EI, health premium. There may be pension, superannuation, life insurance. You might have medical plans. In this pay stub, we don't have that. And on this side, we have the CPP, and we have the bi-weekly amount that's been deducted from this pay stub of $81.40. That's the amount we're going to be adding to the expenses. And we can use our handy cheat sheet, and this is a bi-weekly pay stub. We're going to do B for all of these. You saw the EI premium earlier on the pay stub. That is $28.04. We're going to add B. The income taxes in that pay stub were a combination of federal income tax and provincial income tax. So what we're going to want to do is add the amounts together. 166.52 plus 80.36 gives us 246.88. Your pay stub might not have the pension contribution or union dues. That's fine. Our example did not. I'm going to add them in here just as an example. That's $67. And let's assume that there's $35 for union dues. Our software will calculate that for you automatically once you send it to us. Moving on to the next section, the first item is housing. So if you currently rent, you'll just be deleting the mortgage. If you currently have a mortgage, you'll be deleting the rent. Here, let's assume that the client is renting. Another point that often comes up here is if you're living with someone currently who's contributing towards the rent. Let's say that you contribute half the rent and your partner, maybe a parent, someone you're living with contributes the rest. So what we want to do is only include your portion. So what I'm going to be doing here is 400. If that is your half, you're going to go over here and you're going to write my 50% share. If you have a mortgage and let's say it's your half, we're going to do the same thing. So for property tax, we're just going to go ahead and add 50% share for everything. Copy and paste this. Let's say your final property tax bill, the last one you received, was $5,000 for the year. We know that that should be $2,500, which is half of $5,000. We're going to add that in, and we're going to put property insurance. Let's say that's monthly at $120. You're going to add 60. And I should add here, I'm using round numbers because this is an example. If your property insurance is going to be $125.67, my preference is that you would actually do that calculation. And the reason is the same as I explained earlier, accuracy. And let's round up, 62.84. Assume there are condominium fees, and half would be 300. And repairs and maintenance, obviously we can't get an exact amount for that. That's something that you'll just have to estimate. For the half share, I'm going to estimate $120. For your utilities, water is a bill that you receive once every month, typically in Ottawa. We're going to look at your last bill. Let's assume that was $65.04. And we're going to want to divide that in two. And again, if you live with someone else, you're going to want to halve that again because it's your half share. We're going to be doing the same with heat. Electricity, typically people don't have landlines anymore. We would just leave that blank. If this is a package deal, which it often is, feel free to adjust the form. Let's assume there's a package deal here, and let's assume that cost is $120.43 per month. We have internet here as well, so we can delete these fields. Let's say you don't have a landline, we can delete telephone. If you pay for online subscriptions, we can enter them. In terms of household expenses, we want to again be as accurate as possible. We're going to want to estimate groceries for the whole household, and we're going to look at what is your share. So in this example, let's say that your share of groceries is going to be $600 a month. Household supplies, these can be cleaning supplies. We can estimate $25. Do whatever is best for your situation. Meals outside the home, we're going to put in $180. That would be your share of the meals from outside the home. Pet care, I'm going to add $100. Let's assume there's dogs, big dogs, vet bills, who knows. For laundry, we're just going to look at the cost of soap. If you use a coin-operated machine at an apartment, let's say, that's going to be a more regular and precise expense, but let's just put in $15 here for now. And again, please don't do the subtotals. You can if you want to, but we can do them with one click on our end. In terms of childcare costs, what we're going to be doing is looking at just the amount that you're actually paying for daycare. So if your ex is the one who is paying daycare, you're not paying anything, you're going to put 0 here. That's fine for now. We're going to be figuring out the division of what's called a special expense later, and daycare is a special expense typically. What you'll want to do if you have a daycare expense and it's recurring, we're going to add in the number, and as well we'll have it on your tax return if it was an expense that was incurred the previous year. Babysitting costs, we're going to estimate $80 a month. Moving on to transportation, public transit, taxis, Uber, rideshare programs, we're going to add in $200. If we're looking at gas and oil, and you have an oil change every 3 months, let's say it's $60 each time, that's going to be $240 a year. So we can put $240 as a placeholder. And then if your gas is $100 a month, we know that that's going to be $1,200 a year. So we're going to add those together. And we've estimated this as a yearly expense. It's just easier to do in this case because you're not doing an oil change every month likely. Car insurance and licensing. This is typically an expense as of the time of making this video of $240 every 2 years. So $10 a month, and we're going to add that to your car insurance. So if your car insurance is $110, we're going to add in $120. Repairs and maintenance, another one that's very difficult to estimate. Get a rough sense of your maintenance for the last year or so. We're going to say $125 a month. And that could account for some more major repairs. Let's say if we know that the transmission is shot and will need to be replaced. Parking, let's assume there's a parking pass of $80 a month. Car loan or lease payments, these are usually monthly payments. You'll have to look at your bank statements to get the exact amount. If they're bi-weekly, then of course you're going to use the B function. In terms of health, usually health insurance premiums, if you don't pay for them privately, are going to be on your pay stub. We're going to assume it's $39 deducted from your pay stub and you don't contribute to a private plan. If you do, you would simply add those amounts. Dental expenses, another one that's difficult to estimate. Let's assume that there's no major dental work that's occurred. Let's assume you go in for a cleaning twice a year. Cleaning's $120 each time, so we're going to put in $240. Medicine and drugs, this is talking about the out-of-pocket cost of that. So let's assume $40 a month for your medication. If your child also has significant medical costs, I would add that in as well as a separate line item. What you're going to be doing is right-clicking, going to Insert, and then clicking to row above or row below. You're going to see that a second row has been added. and you can type in prescription for and your child name. We're going to assume that is $63 a month. In terms of personal expenses, we see a very wide range of what different people spend. It's not something that you need to follow as an example. This is just something that I've picked up off the top of my head. But essentially you want to put in what's the best for your budget, what's the most accurate, not necessarily what conforms to what you think it should be. It's not a strategic document. Entertainment and recreation, including children. This one I find is sometimes easier to separate into two columns. Again, you'll be right-clicking on Insert, click Row below, and you can modify the form to fit your needs. So you're going to estimate a monthly amount. And then for the children, this is going to be exclusively their part. We'll add in $50. Gifts is something that I think most people underestimate. You'll want to include all of the gifts for all special occasions, birthdays, holidays, Christmas, whatever you celebrate. We're almost there, last section of the budget. Life insurance premiums, you'll likely have that as part of your pay stub, but if you don't, say there's a private plan, you're going to add the amount here. We're going to say it's $50.42. RESP withdrawals. Now this is the amount of the expense that's associated with a withdrawal. I would recommend leaving this blank and simply providing us with the information about that, because it can be complicated. What we'd be looking at would be the actual taxable component of that. If you haven't withdrawn from an RRSP or an RESP, also leave this one blank. Vacations, you can estimate the yearly amount of vacations you take. School fees and supplies, another one again that's great to estimate over the course of a year. Clothing for children, you might find this helpful to do over a year as well. Children's activities, this can be a little bit different than the previous item, which was recreation. This can be, for example, soccer. Fees plus equipment. Summer camp expenses, another one that's great to do over the course of a year. Debt payments. So this is going to be the amount of debt that you pay every month. Like a lot of these expenses that we've been entering have been incurred on a credit card or a line of credit, and you pay that off every month, we're going to enter 0. But if you have, let's say, a $8,000 credit card that's been frozen and you're paying $200 a month, we're going to add that in there. If there's any other children that you pay child support for, we'll add that in as well. And if there's any other expense that you've been thinking of and it hasn't fit into any of the categories that we've talked about, now would be the opportunity. And again, you can always right-click, click Insert, and add more rows if you need to do so, and we can easily calculate it on our end. If we see a result here, 102,000, we see that the amount of income this person is earning is 48,000. There may be a problem. This may also just be accurate. If this person is losing a significant amount of money every year, and we see that reflected in the bank statements, this could be the accurate situation. Oftentimes there's an overestimation, sometimes there's an underestimation. When this happens, take a look at this, but don't be too concerned about it as long as you're comfortable that the numbers are accurate. If you're comfortable that the numbers are accurate, your lawyer will go through this with you in the meeting as well, and we'll just make sure that the numbers actually depict the financial statement. Part 3, Assets. You'll find this on page 4 of your financial statement. In this part of your financial statement, it's easiest if you have your online banking open in another tab or on your phone in another window. That way we can find these numbers with ease. And it's important that the assets are as of the date of making this statement. If there's a small delay between your entering this information and you signing this form with your lawyer, that's not going to be a problem. But if there's something that's significantly changed since that time, you may need to make a further adjustment to the statement so that it's accurate as of the time that you've signed it with your lawyer. We're going to assume that you co-own your property with a new partner, let's say. We're going to add the address and the nature of your ownership. We're going to assume the total value of the house you estimate at $615, and your half is therefore going to be $307,500. For cars and boats and vehicles, you don't add that if that's a lease. If you're financing it, we would add that as well. We also have to add any associated debt. For We're going to add a vehicle at $5,000. And here I would tend to suggest that anything over $500 should be added. If you're struggling to come up with something that you own over $500, maybe start at $200. We don't want this to be a very lengthy list, but say you have a baseball card collection, you estimate that to be worth $2,000. A laptop, and the laptop's old, maybe it's going to be $500. Again, these are the values as of the date of the statement, not as of when they were new. Let's assume there's jewelry as well, and we're going to estimate that as well at $600. For investments, we're looking really specifically at financial instruments rather than bank accounts necessarily. So let's assume that you have stocks in a private company, and we're going to add the numbers of share, and let's assume the shares are worth $10 each. If there's any others that are already included in an investment account, for example with your bank like BMO, we'll include that separately below. Since each investment account can have multiple shares, it's not practical to include every single share. I would recommend you include the account specifically. So we're going to add here a BMO investor line account, and we're going to specify that this is a self-directed account. We're going to skip a little bit ahead. We're going to go down to savings plans, RSPs, RESP, and instead of self-directed, we're going to change the name to RSP right here. Let's assume the amount of the RSP is $23,459. Typically, this is not enough room for most people. Most people have more accounts than this. So you will want to right-click and add some more rows. And what we're going to look at is things like checking account. You'll want to add the local branch as well. And we're going to change the account number, the last 3 digits. And let's assume you have $567.23 as of the date of writing the statement. Let's assume you have a savings account as well with BMO, and the account number is going to be 674, and you have $6,087 in your savings account. You may have a savings account with another bank. In this case, I'm including a TD savings account, and let's say you have a TD checking account as well. And even if these accounts are not active, it's important to include them. If there's an RESP, you have to include that as well. If you have a pension plan and you're not sure what the value is, you can always put TBD, and that's because often you haven't done a pension valuation. We're also going to include an RESP and the account number. Again, you need not actually do any subtotals. We can easily calculate this for you with our software. There's a life insurance policy. We're going to include the type of policy, either a whole life insurance policy or term. Typically, life insurance is term. If you have a whole life insurance policy, I don't need to explain that to you. You understand what you're in. The beneficiary or multiple beneficiaries if there's more than one, and the face amount, how much the beneficiary would receive. Typically, there's not going to be a cash surrender value unless it's a whole life insurance policy. If it's a term, the value is typically going to be 0. If you have any interest in business, you would add that in here. You're going to be adding in the name and the address of the business. Let's assume that this person owns a business and their share is half, and they run it through their home address, and your interest in the business is 50%. These are difficult to value for financial statements. I would encourage you simply to provide the year-end statements to your lawyer and indicate to be determined as the actual value. If there's anyone who owes you money, so for example, a court judgment, a family friend who you expect to repay you, a buddy that you've loaned money to, we're going to be including them here, and how much the debt is worth. If there's any other assets of value that haven't been included, you would include those here as well. If you have any questions, again, we're here to help. You can ask us. In terms of debt, what we're going to be doing is adding the most typical ones that we see. We're going to add a mortgage, line of credit, and credit card. Here you'll want to include the name as well of the creditor, so TD Bank, let's say. And while it doesn't indicate to include the bank account, I would recommend you do so for lines of credits and credit cards. Specifically, mortgage is not as important. And we also want to include the address of that bank branch. In the example we used, this person's share was half. We're going to assume there's $120,000 still owing, that monthly payments are being made. The line of credit, we're going to do the same thing. And for the credit card, let's say you pay off the full amount every month. We're going to do something a little bit differently. We're going to look at the current value of the credit card. We're going to say that's $2,341. We're going to write paid in full every month, and payments being made, yes. An example of something where payments may not be made currently would be something like a debt to a friend with no repayment date, a debt to the CRA, for example. Let's say the CRA says you owe $23,000 in taxes and you haven't started to make payments on those arrears yet. Maybe you're disputing the amount. You're going to put TBD, to be determined, for the amount, and that payments are being made. You would write no. If there's anything outstanding at the end of the month for a credit card, we're going to include that as well. So let's assume that there's another credit card, and again I encourage you to put the account number in here, but this time it's with BMO. And let's assume that this card is frozen. We're just going to indicate that it's been frozen. There's $6,000 owing, that you've agreed to make monthly payments of $50, and that you are making that payment. If there's any support amounts that are unpaid, we'll want to include that as well. If you're not sure on the correctness of that amount, you're just going to put TBD for all of the fields. If there's any other debts that haven't been included above, you would include them here. And again, we're going to do the calculation for you. You're also given a summary of the assets and debts. In this case, we have $400,000 approximately of assets, $171,000 of debts, and a net of $232. You don't have to worry too much about these numbers. Don't worry about whether this number makes you look bad, makes you look good. It should just be the most accurate number. The key is accuracy. It's not a strategic document. This is going to be what you're going to be signing with your lawyer. It needs to be signed with your lawyer in video or in person. The lawyer will complete the information and provide you instructions on that. You'll be meeting with the lawyer or someone from our office ahead of signing this. When completing the proposed budget, the task is to look at what is actually going to change. Is there going to be, as a part of this case, an increase in support, and how would that affect your budget? So most of it's going to be the same from above, except for what's going to change, and I don't know what's going to change in your case. It depends on the facts of your case. This is a general video. For instance, if as part of the proposal from you or the other side, support's going to increase, you can use this form to show how that might impact your budget. You don't understand this, just let us know, that's fine. You can come to the meeting with this part blank and we can assist you. In terms of additional sources of income, if you receive any income that hasn't been included above, you would include that here in the actual amount. Schedule B, you would only want to include if you're making or responding to a claim for undue hardship, which is an extremely rare claim, or spousal support. If the other side is asking for spousal or you're asking for spousal, you need to complete this. You're going to indicate whether you live alone. If you're living with someone, a new partner, we would include their name here. How many children are in the house, where your partner works, and how much they earn per year. We also want to include how much they contribute towards the home. So if you're one of those people who have put in your 50% share, whatever your share might be, you're going to want to do the math and find out how much the other person contributes. In terms of special or extraordinary expenses in Schedule C, this is something that you're not going to be able to complete completely on your own, and that's quite all right. If you're not sure what a special or extraordinary expense is, you might have heard your lawyer say Section 7 of the Child Support Guidelines. It's the same thing. What we're looking at is child care expenses, medical and dental insurance premiums attributable to the child, health-related expenses that exceed the reimbursement by at least $100 annually, primary or secondary school education expenses, post-secondary education expenses, extracurricular activities. Your lawyer can give you more information on whether the expense you're considering is a special or extraordinary expense. If you're not sure, it's best to include the expense, and we can simply remove it if it's not appropriate. We're going to do an example here with 2 children, and we're going to assume that one child has 2 activities and the other just has 1. We're going to put in music lessons at $3,000 a year, We're not going to touch tax credits at this point. That's something that your lawyer is going to help you out with. And we're also going to assume recreational soccer at $600 a year. We're going to put daycare for the youngest child, and we're going to put $9,600. And of course, with daycare, there's a significant tax credit that your lawyer will input here for you. It's just enough to include this for us. That concludes the presentation on the financial statement. I hope that was helpful. If the video was helpful, please leave some feedback. If you found it was too slow, too fast, too confusing, let me know. The feedback is valuable. I may have time to make another one of these someday. Thanks very much. And again, please feel free to contact us if you have any questions or are having difficulty.